Welcome back to the Voices of Business, a Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce podcast. It's good to be with you. I'm your co-host, Joshua Maddux. Corey Nathan is out. We're not sure where he is. He's still lost somewhere. Last episode, he was on the 5 freeway. He might still be there. We don't know. This is where we talk about business in the Santa Clarita Valley and really all over the country. But today we are going to have a discussion with the Director of Operations and Close Protection Agent, Austin Boggan of the J Blair Group. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. So you went to the same university as I did, as I was diving into this.
Did we?
Yeah,
Did we?
we both went to ULV.
All right.
Now, were you local on campus, or were you one of their 35 different remote sites?
They've got satellites everywhere, apparently. I was on site. I was up there
Okay.
in the city of Laverne.
Okay. I did the business extension at the College of the Canyons career or university center or whatever. And so my
Nice.
first time on campus was graduation day, which was very confusing because people, I was like, where's this building? They're like, you're graduating from this school and you don't know where buildings are. Great. So it made it really interesting.
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, phenomenal place. I really loved it up there. Beautiful spot to be. Really mellow, kind of small town. But yeah, interesting facts. I didn't know that.
So as looking at sort of your college career there, you started in some event management. Was that during college in Laverne, or?
Yeah. So my protective services career started in high school, actually. I had a high school strength and conditioning coach for our football team who ran the floor at some fairly large concert venues. And he was like, hey, you're a fairly large individual. Why don't you come help me out this summer? And that was when I was 18. So that's actually where it started. So that's the event security stuff that you'll probably see floating around just in the pits, concerts, trying to manage large crowds and enjoy the show without, shoving it on your face.
Got it. So you started right out of high school, or in the high school still, in sort of in the protected space. How did that sort of shape that career path and that trajectory as you headed towards college?
Yeah. So I actually didn't think it was something that would be a long-term play for me. I think most people that know me would say that I've always had kind of a protective instinct. I was always kind of a larger kid and I had friends that, sometimes got picked on. So I was very inclined to make sure that they didn't. So to say, I grew up in a very small rural town and bullying was a thing. Still is a thing. It's probably going to be a thing for some time. But the only thing you can do is try to put a stop to it when you see it. So, yeah, that's where it started. I went to college at the University of Laverne. I was a biology major. I wanted to go into a medical track, and it's kind of a weird transition, but in high school, I had a football injury where clavicle basically exploded inside of my body, and it was a little bit life threatening. And an orthopedic surgeon at the University of Stanford, shout out, saved my life, and put me back together in one piece, at least for the most part. And so I was like, man, it was an incredible experience. He definitely helped me out. I didn't think I was going to be able to play ball again. Didn't think I was going to be able to do very many physical things again after that. And he got me on my feet. So I was like, I could do that. So biology was actually my major of choice in college.
Got it. So didn't necessarily see the protective services as a career path, which, there's so many careers that aren't on the standard, college list necessarily. But definitely a choice. So left Laverne and headed to the military.
I did.
So did some protective service, went to school, and then, a little bit more protective service with a little bit more advanced training, I'd say.
Yeah, we stepped it up a notch for sure.
Just a notch.
Yeah, like I said, high school was a very rural town. I grew up in the town of Paso Robles, California, on the Central Coast, which is known for its wine now. But when I grew up there, it was mostly dirt and football. That was kind of the feel of the town. Some agriculture, really great people up there. Um, so like I said, I didn't really see it in the cards. It was just something that I was doing to, make some money as a teenager. Went through the biology thing at Laverne, got about 3.5 years through with that. And, had some personal life instances happen where I was like, I need to, I need to toughen up a bit. I need to get myself under control. I need to find some purpose. And so, so me and my buddies in high school had always talked about joining the military because that's one of the few career paths that you had at that point coming out of a very small town. You go to work in agriculture, or you join the military, maybe law enforcement. That's kind of how you think. And so lo and behold, I ran to a recruiter's office and said, "Hey, let's do this thing." So I embarked with the United States Marine Corps in June of 2016.
And then served a few years there. Uh, Came home and decided that, you know, the final frontier was the right place to be?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that a lot. My time in the Marine Corps was, I mean, you could go on that topic for days. It was a double-edged sword. It's some of the most miserable times you'll ever have, but some of the best times you'll ever have. Some of the most romantic things I've ever done in my life were with a bunch of other dudes walking into the sunset on some mountain somewhere, some ridge. Um, so make the best friends I've ever had in my life, just suffering together, getting better, training, doing hard things, and obviously learned quite a bit about protective security and, how to defend positions and different kind of things like that. Lots of training goes there. So yeah, I got out and, the circumstances of me leaving the military were actually not on my own terms. I got medically separated for an injury that I sustained on a deployment. Nothing crazy, I didn't sustain any injuries like a lot of guys would in a combat zone, but it was something where the Department of the Navy wasn't willing, despite all of my appeals, to let me continue. So just under 4 years, I departed, and I was like, well, no, I wasn't done. I wasn't done with that. So I have to find the thing that's going to continue to put some electricity in my bones and that I enjoy doing and that'll let me travel and fulfill the kind of desire that I have to help people. And so that was the transition for me into protective services on the private sector.
Got it. And then when you left the military or, separated there, um,
Yeah,
you landed at SpaceX. Is that
a day.
what was the direction there? Was that continued security or
It was. Yeah.
okay,
So SpaceX was at a point in 2019 where they were formally contracting security for their site, for their headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
got it.
And, you know, as with anything else, you can have quality control issues, but it was such a nuanced space with what was going on there. I mean, it's a very heavily regulated industry and facility if you're building rockets domestically, because a lot of people want that information and that technology. And so security is a very large piece of a business like that. And they wanted to bring a security team in house. And so I got a call from one of the managers over there. Landon Prairie is a phenomenal individual. And he was like, "Hey, I know you just got out. If you want to give this thing a shot, we're building a team here and we can really use some help." And, fantastic. That allowed me to learn a lot, international trafficking of arms regulated facilities. There's a lot that goes into it. And so different routes of security, driving pressurized rocket tubes around the country a little bit. That could
Well, and
level
you
a small city
definitely
of tipped, kind of
yeah.
thing.
Well, and you definitely had a little bit of formal training having been in the military. Like I know oftentimes uh manufacturing or companies that are doing government contract like hiring guys who've had that experience because they're like, you understand what it looks like, you understand the formal training, you've been in the field, like you have some of the security clearances already, like
Yeah.
you're 90% of the way there. There might be some, little things that they need to do, but it gets
Yeah,
you.
definitely some refinement and some kind of what we call SOP, some standard operating procedures that are
Yep.
specific to that industry. You got to know what an ITAR regulated piece of equipment looks like. You can't just leave rocket pieces laying out in public, you know? So some nuance there for sure, but there was a lot of transferability, and it gave me some stability coming right out of the military, which I was super grateful for. And it allowed me to kind of reset and decide what route I wanted to go. While I was there, that's kind of where I got my secondary piece of exposure to security on the personal side as well. Because obviously there's the site of, SpaceX and next door, which is a Tesla facility, and the nuance and technicality that goes with what happens in that facility. But there's also, executives, there's boards, and there's people who need to be protected as well. And so, that was some secondary exposure post military to that kind of thing. And that's kind of more where I am now.
Yeah. Now you today, are sort of director of operation or are director of operations with J Blair Group, and you do a lot of like close protection, with your guys' clients. But between SpaceX and there, you had a little bit of a gap there, which you worked with an auction house or an auction company, um,
Yeah.
selling mansions. Or
Essentially,
was that
essentially.
protection detail for those who, I imagine, when you're selling a $100 million property, there's some assets that need to be protected and covered.
There are, but fascinating enough, that wasn't my role. I was selling those properties. I was an auction representative there. So basically the story here, and I'll keep it short, but really great times there. My neighbor, when I was working at SpaceX, I was a couple years deep there and, enjoying it. It was consistent, but I was always kind of curious about other industries. And, I had some brief exposure to sales training when I was out of high school. And I was kind of like, well, that sounds fun. Basically, the job description that my neighbor had given me, he said, we're looking for some people. And basically the job is, we have properties that sell all over the world and we have to find buyers for them because they go up at auction. So we have to saturate the pipelines with buyers to come bid on these properties. We need people who you can drop pretty much anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and they can go figure out who they need to talk to, where they need to be to find these high net worth individuals to bid on these properties. And similarly, kind of a little bit similar to the military, it's kind of like you can get dropped anywhere and you just have to figure it out. You got to look at your surroundings, read the room, see who make some educated guesses on who you might need to talk to, who you might need to befriend. Instead of overthrowing governments, it was to sell houses. So that's kind of what happened there. And it was a fun time. It was a really fun time. I met some great people doing that.
And that to me right there is what's so amazing, is the fact that like the transferable skills of being in the US military versus selling a multi-million-dollar mansion, like there are transferable skills, which like at a high level, like when you think about it, you're like, how the heck? But yeah, being ready to be dropped in any environment, being able to, you know, figure out who that target, quote unquote, is in either one of those environments, like and move forward with that. That's funny. It's
Yeah,
just
no, it's wild. You should see, I mean, some of the looks I got, because I look for my transferable skills and decide where I can apply them all the time. Because if you're not
yeah.
growing, you're not dying, right? It's kind of like you have to apply everything you have if you're going to move forward. And so I got a lot of funny looks in the real estate and auction world when, I was getting assignments out in Pennsylvania or wherever it may be, California, and I started building target packages on individuals that I think might be a good fit to bid on this property. They're like, that is weird. You shouldn't be building target packages on civilians. That's an interesting thing to do. I was like, there's no action here. It's just, I want to go meet them and this is the way that I'm going to do it. We have a mutual friend in common and, you have to be able to finagle that a little bit. So
Yeah, if you're finding who you're taking to dinner and informing about the property.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just a different
I mean,
approach, but it's the same thing.
yeah, it totally is. There's a client of ours that's an architect, and they approached us and he was like, "Hey, I want to run Facebook ads to get clients." And I was like, "That's a terrible way to spend your marketing dollars as an architect." And I was like,
Right.
"Better idea. You have to eat lunch, have your assistant contact every general contractor in the area, and anyone who builds the type of houses that you would design, take them to lunch. And so this guy every Friday targets one of those
Right.
general contractors and takes a general contractor to lunch every week.
Right.
And like it's the same concept. It's knowing your target, knowing who that is and acting on it. It's
Exactly.
yeah, whether
And
it's
to put it in terms, to put it in terms that are probably very relevant to you, you just have to know your audience. You got to know how to find
100%.
your audience and how to get in front of your audience.
Yep.
And I know you do it all the time. So I know you understand very well.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if it's the US military or selling mansions or yeah. Um, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, yeah, at a 20,000 foot level, it is. There's some nuances there.
Yeah.
But so okay, so you're done selling mansions and we're moving back to private security. Obviously, now with the J Blair Group, like you're running day-to-day ops and that type of stuff now. What did that transition look like? What prompted that decision to move back into the personal protection?
Yeah, great question. So just transparently speaking, the company that I was working for, and again, phenomenal people, not a single negative thing to say, great experience across the board, but they did get purchased by a larger company and things got just quite a bit more corporate. We were independent contractors that would get a text saying, hey, there's a project in this state. You want it? And that was it. And you had 6 weeks to go out there and figure out how to find 6 to 10 people to bid on this property. And it transformed into something a little bit different. Everyone became employees. So there's obviously different tax implications there. In addition to a lot more guidelines and structure behind the job. And then eventually I think the role that I was actually operating in got done away with altogether. So just early on after that acquisition, I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And it was like, I enjoy just kind of a Wild West style of work. I don't necessarily need to be the boss. I enjoy being somewhere near the top where I have some decision-making power or can at least make my own decisions on how I want to approach something. Because the beauty of that job was location, timeline, mission. Like that's it. Go find people to buy these properties. You're up. That's it. And so
Yeah.
I had the freedom to make those decisions and decide what my approach was going to be and scheme and design my plan of attack. And so when that kind of turned in a different direction, I was like, well, where's somewhere else that I can still do that, but that's fulfilling type work for me? Because selling matches is fantastic. And at the end of the day, sure, you're probably making somebody's life better, but these are usually third, fourth, fifth, sixth properties for folks. It's not like you're selling somebody their first time property and they're,
Yeah.
crying with the keys and that kind of thing. It's an investment. I really enjoy the type of work where I can make an impact for an individual. Like, for instance, protecting people who actually need protecting is probably one of the most fulfilling types of work that I've ever had the opportunity to work in. And so at the same time where I was transitioning out, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine who I was deployed with in 2018, named Tony. And he just had a very simple message, which was, hey, we need an extra set of capable hands. We have to drive this high value client's parents across the country because they don't fly. And we're going to take an RV. It's going to take about 4 days and you'll make some good money doing it. I was like, well, that sounds fun. Like, why not? I'm in a transition period. Road trip.
Let's
with my
take a
best
road
friend
trip.
to,
Yeah.
I would like that. Sounds phenomenal. Count me in.
And get
So
paid
great.
to do it. Like,
Right. And this trip was a nightmare of a trip.
geez.
We, being both Marines, we had our hats on. We're mission planning. We're going to stop at these gas stations. The fuel tank is this capacity, so we can get this far before we need to refuel. We'll take this route because there's storms coming in. We're planning the whole thing out just logistically. And then lo and behold, some very gnarly storms hit, some very dangerous storms hit. I mean, we ran a couple times into some multiple casualty car pileup situations. There's 6-foot snowbanks on the road. This was like February timeframe 2021, where the whole Midwest just got devoured with snowstorms. So we're, jumping snowbanks in this 30-foot RV in Oklahoma on our way up to the northeast of the country. And splitting lanes between traffic that's been stopped for 18 hours with this much room on either side of this RV. I'm outside going like this. Hey, you're good on this side, move this way. Between trucks that have just parked there, people are sleeping in their vehicles. We're like, we're getting out of here. We're not, we can't let these clients just sit here. It's cold. The power in the RV went out. So we're lighting burners to try to keep these folks warm because they're on the older side. Just a nightmare of a trip. And then at the end of it, we got them safely to their destination, and they were just like, guys, we can't thank you enough. That was a crazy thing, but you made the best of it. And then me and my buddy popped off and grabbed some steaks and just high fived and then went back. And I was like, man, I could do that. That's a fun life, just to have similar minded people, similar mission, just keeping people safe on their day-to-day lives because the world is crazy and you have some fun while you're doing it. And if you're, you know, if you've got the logistical capacity to really plan things and stay cool, calm under pressure, it's a fun life. So that was kind of the weird but wild transition. The man who owned that company was named J Blair, which is where I am now.
Got it. That's crazy. It took a road trip across the country in like literally like obviously we can't go into a ton of detail on specifics there, but like
Yeah,
it's I feel like we're outlining a script for a movie. Like
it could have been. It could have been an episode at least. It was a good
yeah,
time. Yeah.
that's crazy. That's crazy. So tell us a little bit about like where you are now. Like what is the type of stuff that you do? All the details. Who were you working with last week?
Nice
Um,
try. Yeah. So
yeah.
I've been here for about 3 years now, at J Blair Group. And when I found the company, they were, a well-established company. J Blair Group's been in existence for 12 years. Just for some context, John, is a fantastic kind of American dream story, actually. So he grew up in Kentucky, rural, Kentucky, just on farms, very kind of similar to how I did, just in Central California. And he moved out here when he was a young man with a backpack and a dream, and started working doors at nightclubs and bars and doing security that way because he was just a bigger guy, tall, lean, great looking individual. So he was well liked by the people he worked with and worked his way up and eventually started the company. Um, and he got some shots with some kind of high profile individuals in the entertainment space. And that's where he got his start. And then he's been rolling ever since. And so, yeah, my path was pretty much that. We met, we really liked each other. We come from similar roots. We value very similar things, which is just doing very thorough, detail oriented, ethical business, keeping people safe, just being a good dude. That's what we call it, right? Just being a good dude in business, treating people right and keeping them safe. So, we hit it off, and he took a shot on me because I had, quite a bit of experience from military and from prior to that, just on the close protection side. And he let me go out and cover a few of his clients, and I shadowed him for a few days. And I was like, this is fulfilling, enjoyable work. And I could see the company was in a place where, even though they had been in existence for 12 years, they were really in their infancy. There's a lot of room for growth. There was just some systems and processes that I think we could have improved, made smoother, made better for a better client experience. And so we just went to work on that. He liked the work that I did with that. Plus I had some experience with trying to get in front of high net worth individuals, which is a huge part of the security industry. I mean, that's probably going to be a topic that we'll cover at some point. It's just, how do you get in front of high net worth individuals? Like you said, there's lots of ways to do it, but they're tough. You can't just pick up a phone and cold call a CEO most of the times. You're going to get a few numbers before you get there. Same thing with wealthy homeowners or, business owners of any kind. It's tough. And so I did have some experience with that, and I could kind of play that game, to give people what they needed, kind of before they knew they needed it. And so he saw the value there and brought me in as the West Coast regional manager. And then, we expanded from there. Now we're in a point where we're growing at a pretty accelerated pace. As always, it's chaotic, growth is messy, but if you can keep a level head and see what's on the other side, you can push through it and get there. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, and I know, speaking to a few points there, like one of the things, you'd mentioned sort of there were some aspects of the company that was a little bit in its infancy, like, but at the same point, like, because of the type of work and the type of industry you guys are in, like it is ever changing. It is like what you did for that last client last week, like, is not, you can't do the exact same thing tomorrow. Like, that's not
Oh
gonna
yeah.
work because there's a different threat, there's a different pattern, there's a different whatever. And so, like, there are some of those pieces where, yeah, you do have to have an SOP for some stuff, but there's other things where it's like, we can outline some bullet points as a guideline, but like that's going to be changing every day. Like,
Right.
and
It's a
so
great point.
I imagine there's aspects of that that, do change on a recurring basis.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact that you're very familiar with a lot of them because marketing for one client is completely different than marketing for an next. Like you said, that
Yeah.
I think in our pre-conversation, an individual that you were doing some work with, or no, during this interview here, wanted to spend some ad dollars on Facebook advertising. And you're like, that's a terrible idea. For somebody
Yeah.
else, it may not have been, but for him, it wasn't a good fit. And so we do the same thing. And throw back to the funny looks that I got at the auction house for building target packages. They do the same thing here. When we get a prospective new client, it's like, okay, who are you? What do you do? What's your thing? What's your life like behind closed doors? How do you conduct yourself? Who are your connections? Do I have any mutual connections with other people who I might know with you that might help me better protect you or better serve you? You'd be surprised, it's the day of the internet. You can find pretty much anything you want to find. You could find somebody's water preference if you really wanted to, just using OSINT, open source intelligence collecting. And
Oh,
so,
there's so much stuff you can find. It's
oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's a story for another day. Yeah,
I'd love to hear it.
we've yeah, I have a friend of mine who, works in the pen testing field or used to, and has done some, they didn't do, like, asset protection like you guys do. They did a lot more of the, like, looking at, someone's house, like, what security measures do we need to do there? What type of business security measures do we need to do? And they did a lot more of
Yeah.
that type of stuff. And there's some stuff that, they've ran into that it's just like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do a bit of that too, and that's a very fun aspect of work is
Yeah.
analyzing a situation and predicting what threats may be, and then defending against preemptively. Like that's kind of the whole risk management approach.
Yeah.
So you'd be surprised. And at the end of the day, on the security field, like there's 100 guys, 1,000 guys who can do a decent job at getting somebody from point A to point B. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to route plan and to get somebody where they need to be and make sure they don't get bombarded or injured or embarrassed or put in some sort of liability situation on their route. Um, what the difference maker is really customer service. And if you just the same as any other business, kind of like the auction house, it was all customer service. How do you treat people? How do you make their experience worth their time and want more of it? And how we do that on our side is just customer service. I don't want to give away all of John's trade secrets here, but that's what it is. If you
Yeah.
want the job, you got to do a better job at it. And the more homework we do more homework than I think probably anybody else in the space. I'm not going to say that's a solid because I'm sure there are people who are more thorough than we are. But if I'm going to go on a protective services detail, I'm going to know pretty much everything about you before I step foot there. So when I ask Josh, hey, how's Corey doing today? He's going to be like, how do you know Corey? Well,
Yeah.
we did our homework and I can better serve you because I know what you need based on the stuff that I found out about you. So that's a big
Well,
part of it.
the more you know about that specific client, like if you're going to a venue and they like coffee and you're walking past a coffee cart, you're like, well, now that's a risk because they're going to grab a cup of coffee and we're going to wait 5 minutes in line. Like,
Right.
and so
Or she's going to stay in the car and we're going to grab it and I'll have her order. Ta-da. Now you get the
exactly.
call back for the job. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Great
Yep.
point.
Yep. Awesome. Well, obviously, one of the things, sort of elements that I like bringing up is looking at just current business like dynamics and like industry conditions and changes in the industry. And I imagine that we could probably talk for the next, 3 hours on that topic
Oh,
alone.
I'm a geek as
Um,
well. I'm a data
yeah,
guy. Business is kind of like a second love of mine behind, protective services. That's fascinating stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I think just industry conditions and sort of challenges and changes in the industry. What are you guys seeing as some of those big, shifts?
Yeah. It's a great question. There's always going to be the elephant in the room when it comes to security of just quality of service and manpower. It's a service, and it's a service sector of the industry. So you got to have people to perform those services. You got to have people who are committed, who meet all of these criteria, who can do a great job no matter where they are, who they're with. So manpower is alone, and scaling quality individuals is a very tough thing to do. You essentially need somebody who can, act independently and operate independently and be dropped anywhere in the world with anybody and be able to figure out if something goes wrong, how to get out of it, and how to maintain some customer service in the process and keep that client happy. It's a hard thing to replicate. And so, our talent acquisition, if you will, is very targeted these days, but that's quite the thing. It's just, if you can replicate the highest quality individual and most capable of individuals, you're going to do really well in the security space. And that's the same problem everybody else has.
Well, and I think, yeah, for you guys, that makes sense. Like, there are aspects of that job that are very hard to train. Like the ability to problem solve under high stress in a fraction of a second is a hard thing to train for.
It
Um,
is.
and it's something that I imagine, you guys look for someone who has that experience, not someone who you can train for that experience. Because that's
Astute observation.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you're spot on there. And the reason why is simple. You can teach somebody customer service. You can teach them how to smile for the most part, um, you can teach them how to do things like route planning and basic, get people from point A to point B and make them happy. The nuances of airports and private, FBOs and hotels, and how to get people in and out privately and things like that. You can teach all of that. And you can teach that much more quickly than you can teach people how to shoot, move, and communicate, do trauma care. Like you said, make split second decisions that could save or not save somebody's life. That takes years and years of repetition and training, which is why, for the most part, our talent acquisition is from prior military, law enforcement, or both type guys. Our roster looks very different than most. We don't typically bring on cats straight out of high school or college and train them up in the field. Our roster is Marines, Navy SEALs, contractors that do overseas work, that are used to high risk, high stress environments, that we can say, hey, by the way, carry some hair ties because this might come in handy, instead of us going, by the way, this is radio etiquette. This is the NATO phonetic alphabet on the radio. This is how you use a firearm. Those things are a lot harder to teach. So we choose the large prerequisites at the top of our funnel. And then we refine we make them gentlemen afterwards. We want very capable, extremely dangerous gentlemen. That is the typical candidate that we're looking for on our side. It's a really good observation. You have to know what your manpower is going to be best used on in training, because we don't have a lot of time for it. Our operational tempo is high. So it's a great point.
yeah. Okay, so I have to ask, what is one of the biggest losses or just total mistakes, or what did that look like? What did you learn from that? And that could be, this job, or, something else, obviously,
Oh man, I've got so many that come to mind, because I've made every mistake in the book, just like anybody else has that's been around for a while.
yeah.
You learn through making the mistakes. So man, I've got a laundry list that could be brought up here. But surprisingly enough, in the industry, in the sector of the industries that we work in, it's very, very rare that we actually have a massive failure in security posture or life-threatening incident. Because we're so thorough on the front end, we really eliminate most possibilities for something bad to happen on the front end, just in planning, just in the specific route that we take or how we're going to get somewhere. We put ourselves as far away from risk as possible. So really the biggest mistakes that we make and the biggest losses that we suffer, especially financial losses, can be from the lack of planning or customer service. Like if you are with a client and you take a wrong turn because you didn't know your route ahead of time and had to rely on your navigation, which was lagging, or there was bad internet connection, clients expect convenience and for you to know where you're going. And that right there can be a massive financial loss if just a little mistake like that. It's not like there was bullets flying, but if you make a wrong turn, it might be the same outcome for the company. They may not retain that client anymore.
Yeah. 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 And that's just the attention to detail aspects, that I think oftentimes can get overlooked, just in the higher volume throughput. And a lot of
Exactly.
businesses overlook that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go for it.
I'm sure it's the same on your end. There's
Yeah.
probably a laundry list of SOPs that you have to go through, questions you have to ask the client to make sure it's thorough and dollars are being spent. Because I know that the difference on the
Yeah.
marketing side is between getting an outcome and not can be the difference between a few buttons clicked or not, or a few creatives used that were split tested a few more times than others. It's the same level of detail. So I know quite well the same concept we're talking about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's for us is it always baffles me when I get someone that just, calls me out of the blue and it's like, "Hey, I own a company. Can you give me a quote for this?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
like, go
Answer these
call
50
go
questions.
yeah, exactly. Like, go call an auto dealership and be like, "How much is a car?" Like, okay, are you looking for a
Right.
Toyota Prius? Are you looking for, do you need to haul a fifth wheel? Like, if you need to haul a fifth wheel from here to, Florida, and you're buying a Toyota Prius, like, that's gonna be a very interesting adventure. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like oftentimes in business, like, people make those split-second decisions, and they don't think through what they might need.
Right. Dude,
And
homework.
it's oh,
I'm
man.
curious. I know this is your show, man, but I'm curious how you guys overcome that. How do you get ahead of the clientele coming in with these kind of broad stroke questions of like, just give me a quote for this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we refer to commonly, like, November, December is what I jokingly refer to as quoting season, where I'll get 3, 4 calls, sometimes a day, of, "I'm planning my marketing budget for next year. I'm a marketing director at X company, and I need a number, like, my boss needs a number."
yeah,
And I generally can, okay, like, what'd you guys do in sales last year? What'd you spend for marketing? What's your conversion rate? What's your cost of acquisition? Like, if you know those numbers, you can start to do some quick math. Like, okay, we want to
yeah,
double our sales. You know your cost of acquisition. Like, it's not going to go up exactly 2 times because it never does. But like, we can do some rough math and pretty quickly figure out where you ballpark ish within 20 to 30% should be. However,
right,
it's businesses that call and go, "What's your cost of acquisition?" "I don't know. What's a cost of acquisition?" And it's like, "Okay,
right.
great. We've got some questions to ask here." And I'm like,
You're
"I
like,
don't
we want
know."
to help you. We really do.
Yeah, or it's the question of like, "What's a website cost?" Uh, a grand to $2 million? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
companies have
Right.
paid both. Like, yeah. So it's hard, and it's coming up with, we've been in business like 17-ish years, and we have like a fill in the blank type sheet that's like walks through planning a site or planning content or planning whatever that might be. And it starts going through those nuanced questions of, what's the goal here? What's the outcome you want, and that type of stuff, and figuring out who that ideal client is, what their action steps they should be taking, how this asset that they're building for the business is going to help that and do that. So
Right. I find
it's
that
good.
so fascinating because it's just such a, it's so much projection. If we do this, is this the likely outcome? Is this going to achieve the most, out of what we wanted to achieve?
Well,
I find those projections so fascinating.
and we have 2 clients that sit in the exact same industry. They do the exact same thing, but their customer could not be further, like, their 2 customers are the exact opposite. One
Crazy.
is single family resident, the other, they only wanna work with apartment buildings that have at least 200 plus units. And so it's like, those are very different customer bases. And
Right.
if we didn't know that, those are 2 very different marketing strategies. Facebook
Right.
ads will work for one, Facebook ads might not work for the other. And so,
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of reverse engineer it. You kind of look at,
you
okay,
do.
what really is the ideal scenario? Who's the end user? And then you kind of narrow down the avatars from there and kind of
Yeah. And
decide
it's
what the approach is going to be.
exactly, it's the same exact thing that you guys do. I mean, the outcome your client wants is to get to XYZ location. Okay. How do we get there? We can take a plane, we can take a train, we can take a car. Like these are the different avenues. What's going to be less risk? What's going to be less time? What's going to be whatever? And you go through the options, figure it out, make a contingency plan,
That's
and
it.
see what option they want to pick. And then when they decide the one that you're like, okay, let's take the detour, like we'll figure
Yep.
out how that's going to work.
Right.
And,
But so many
oh yeah,
similarities, different industries, wildly different, but like you're hired, boom, you know how to problem solve, it's all the same.
yeah. So as we sort of wrap up a little bit, like what um what are some different like either what's a book or some sort of a resource that you've found that sort of not necessarily shaped your career path, but something that you found that's a really helpful resource?
Yeah. I'll let you know when we write it. Uh, yeah, there's it. What's the most beneficial, at least in my scenario, is just field experience. And I can't harp on that enough because I have guys that ask me all the time that are new to the executive protection industry, new to the security industry in general, where it's like, what book can I read? What podcast can I watch? And there are a lot of great ones, but I would say the thing that's going to help the most that I've learned the most from is just finding somebody who does a good job, has a solid reputation, and watching how they work. Watch how the decision making process goes. Say, okay, like I'm watching this individual, they're tailing at this kind of rate. They made this decision because of this. And you just ask questions and refine the process and refine the process and refine the process. So getting out, making the mistakes, but coming in educated, doing the homework first is what will lead to those lessons learned more than any resource that I found, at least on the back end of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say like real world experience for sure. Like, man, we used to hire back when we had more of a physical office, we used to hire interns do an internship program and then hire them from that. And we'd have one who's like, "Oh yeah, I had, 3 semesters of this." I'm like, "Great. Well, can you actually do that?"
Right.
No, I can't. Like, great. Just that
Right.
you had a class on it doesn't mean like there's a difference between book smart, street smart. You can
Oh
be
man,
both.
that's
Like both
huge.
is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm sure we could talk about that all day. Very, very,
absolutely.
very similar there as well. Cause I have this, and this is on my resume. I'm like, okay, but if you're going to do an advance of a place, what does that look like for you? And they're like, that's advanced. That's where you go scout it out. Right. And we're like, yep, that's what that is. So experience, the gap between, you know, what they say is experience or education is very large, which is why we're so big on just the OJT. Like, let's get out and show you how to do this. So long as we have the prerequisites in place, obviously, probably very similar to you guys.
Yeah. I get random like resumes every now and then from people who are like, "Oh, I'm a developer and I'm fluent in these 35 different coding languages." And I'm like, "Really? You're an expert in all 35 of them?" Like,
Right.
cool. Great. Yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
not.
Like I'd be highly impressed, but
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't be sending me your resume because you'd be making 7 figures at least somewhere.
Precisely.
Yeah. So,
Precisely. Yeah.
awesome. Well, as we wrap up, do you have any questions for me as we close things out?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks again for having me. Like, this is a really cool thing. And I know, and I hope that a lot of people in the SCV are benefiting from it and are, getting exposed to other local businesses in the area through this. So I want to commend you guys for taking the leap. It's awesome. I'm really glad you're doing it.
Sure. Been a good
And I
process.
would love to just hear, yeah, kind of what's the big picture with the podcast? What's the end state? What's the end goal with it? And yeah, that's my main question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit sort of before we hit record on this, but yeah, for me, it's two things. One, it's having conversations like this, getting to know a little bit more of the people behind the local business, community. I know one of the things that Corey talks about is sort of having that um, sort of town center that everyone can sort of learn who everybody is. And sadly nowadays, because so much of us sit in a home office or sit on Zoom or sit behind a computer for email or whatever that might be, we've lost a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so I think having this opportunity to be able to have these sort of deeper conversations, you and I ran into each other at one of the chamber events and chatted for a little bit, but um, you're not able to do that with everybody in the chamber and everybody. And so being able
Right.
to have the opportunity to listen to someone's background and hear who they are and sort of dive into that, for me is sort of super cool. And then, it's also, again, it's just that networking aspect, being able to dive deeper and have a deeper conversation, with other chamber members and people that, are here in the community in my backyard and doing cool stuff. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. It's such a cool thing to just connect people, and like you said, all these things are happening simultaneously in our own backyard. Fantastic digital marketing businesses to close protection agencies to all kinds of other things. And there's all kinds of ways that we can help each other. So this is, and I'll wrap up with that on my side, man. If there's anything that I can do to help you guys out, let me know.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Well, as always, please follow, rate, and review us wherever you find your podcast. You can follow us at The Voices of Business on social media. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Joshua Maddux. Corey Nathan is Corey S. Nathan on, I believe, Twitter and LinkedIn. We'd love to have you as a guest on the podcast and continue the conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Voices of Business.